Welcome to Canada Files. I'm Valerie Pringle. My guest today is actor and comic Martin Short. His career has lasted more than 50 years in television, films, and on Broadway. He has created memorable characters like Ed Grimley and Jiminy Glick and is having a sweet renaissance starring in Only Murders in the Building. I spoke with him in New York. Marty, hello.
Hello.
You've had such a remarkably long, successful career. What's kept you interested? What's kept you going?
Oh, I don't know. I guess because I love doing it and it's challenging. Each new job is a new mountain to climb. And what makes doctors keep wanting to be doctors, you know?
So, but you've sort of found success in variety. That, you know, there's TV, there's Broadway, there's movies, that, you know, that you have been able to do a lot of stuff.
Well, I mean, I think, you know, I think it's very Canadian of me. When I started off in 1972 as an actor in Toronto. And there was no definition of what you were. You just, whether it was stage or television or radio or, you know, you just said, do I bring a suit or not? And so I think, in a way, for 7 years, my career was only in Toronto. And that was like, paved the way of how I wanted to do it. I wanted to do all mediums at the same time and just keep it interesting.
But there have been the ups and downs, obviously. There always are. Isn't there a famous spot in Los Angeles called Breakdown Corner?
Oh, yes. That was Flores and Santa Monica. That was in 1977. And I was just, I just finished a stage musical here, and now I didn't have a job, and I was now in California with my wife-to-be, and we were going to meet Paul Schaefer and Bill Murray, and I thought, I can't. Bill had just started an SNL. I said, I can't pretend to be happy for anyone now, because I'm not. It wasn't even that I wasn't working. I didn't know what I wanted to do. Did I want to do? I wasn't sure. I was very kind of confused. And then I went and saw a group called War Babies that night, and I went, that's what I want. I want to do Second City.
Well, you're having this sweet renaissance with Only Murders in the Buildings now. I mean, what a gift this has been.
Oh, fantastic. Well, Steve Martin created it, so that helps.
Well,
I have connections.
Working with Steve, though, and Selena, and, you know, Meryl, I mean, it really, let alone all the other people who parade through.
Yes, absolutely. Eugene Levy.
Unbelievable. So how do you sort of look at this? Like, is this the most fun you've had?
No. It's all been fun. You know, being in a big success is fun, but the success part comes later. What's fun is creating it and doing it. So sometimes a film that doesn't do the business you thought it would do was the most fun you ever had. So you don't worry about the ramifications of art. You worry about, is it an exciting, enjoyable experience when you do it? Because the definition of something's success is determined often 10 years later. It's a Wonderful Life was not terribly successful when it opened. Now it's a classic, you know.
Well, the New York Times did say about you that you steal every scene.
Well, there you go.
You must remember some of these. There was one other great line that said, no, "You don't?
No.
You don't read reviews." This one
No.
says, "Not through grandstanding, but the steady skill of an old pro."
There you go. I'll take that.
Yeah, it's very great. Now, you were that kid in the bedroom, right?
Right.
In Hamilton, Ontario, doing variety shows, singing, making records. What's the
Well, I had a contract with NBC back then. I was on every other Tuesday at 8 p.m. Not every Tuesday, because I was also doing films in my imagination. I was 14, 15. But I took it very seriously. I had an applause record. I even had a gooseneck lamp that gave me lighting, because I knew I needed lighting even then. And an applause record, and I'd record it all, and I'd type things up for TV Guide. And it was a great fantasy that I never took. I think if I'd lived in the United States, I would have said, oh, I want to go and be an actor. But in Canada, in the 60s, it seemed too unrealistic. Mainly watched American television through Buffalo. And to me, it seemed like I was watching something, Disneyland seemed like it was on Neptune.
But isn't there one wonderful story about a record that you made called Martin Short Sings of Songs?
And Love's a Go.
And you
Yes.
still have it?
Yeah, I do.
But your mom, who was a legit, like a real musician.
Oh, she was the first, my mother was the first concert mistress, he used to go in those days, of a symphony in North America, the Hamilton Philharmonic.
But she critiqued it for you.
Yes, and that was the great part, that no one was laughing. No one was saying, he's nuts. They were, I still have the critique she wrote, well sung, a little pitchy, maybe not the best, because I was singing in Frank Sinatra's keys, because it was an album he'd done called September of My Year. So I would do da 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 da, and I'd click, and then I'd take over. But I'm now stuck in his key.
So this was just how you spent your time as a kid.
Yeah. What am I supposed to do? Play hockey?
But you were the youngest of 5, and a really close,
Very close.
lovely family. Mm-hmm. And yet, a lot of sadness. You lost your brother in a car accident.
Yes, when I was 12.
And your parents, you were an orphan by the time you were 20.
Right.
So, that was,
But it's interesting, I think that with that kind of loss and complexity of a childhood, you either become a victim of it or empowered by it. So certainly by 20, I knew things about life and death and the meaning of life way more than other kids my age who had never experienced anything other than happy days. So I think it empowered me. I think it made me braver on stage. I think I didn't care less about the approval of strangers,
Well, you really tragically lost your beloved wife, Nancy Dolman, when she was in her 50s.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a really, sweet story you tell in your book about speaking to your youngest son, the night before she died, and kind of telling him things that you'd learned.
Right, yeah. No, I know. He was 20 as well.
And saying to him, this puts things in perspective, or it's a horrible lesson, but it's a powerful lesson.
Well, that's what it is. I mean, the reality is life is about loss. And how do you digest it? And how do you come out the other end? And if you come out a victim, then that's a shame.
Because you say essentially you're kind of a happy person who...
Well, I think one's natural orientation is to be respected. If you have the happy gene, you kind of end up on that side of it.
Tell me how Eugene Levy changed your life.
Oh, Eugene. Well, Eugene is my oldest and dearest friend. And we met in 1970 through McMaster University. But then, he's 4 years older, so I was still in university in my 4th year, and he was now an actor in Toronto, and he was, working a little bit and struggling a little bit. And I was the president of Proscenium, which did the yearly musical for McMaster, and I hired Eugene to direct it. And of course, he made me the star of it. It was kind of like the Trump administration a little bit. But anyway, so as I'm ending my 4th year, and I was planning to do a master's in social work, Eugene said, you really have some talent, and you should take advantage of it and try and come to Toronto and try to be an actor. And I thought that seemed adventurous, because I'd never left school. But I thought, I will, sure. I decided I would do that for 1 year. I gave myself a 1-year contract. And if at the end of the year, I didn't work, I'd go back to school. Because I realized even then, I was 21, but I realized that it was important to look at the mirror at 50 and say, maybe you should have tried being an actor. And then I could say, oh, no, no, that's right. You did try being an actor and no one hired you. Oh, yeah. But at least try, you know. And so, and then right away I got a job in Godspell. And so I was now still in university, but I had a job. So that started it all.
And it just felt great, singing, acting.
Sure.
And being part of, the people, because there was Godspell at this time in Toronto, which, eventually led to Second City, and you were there, and then SCTV.
Right.
With
Saturday Night Live and
but
the movies.
Yeah. The time, it seems, though, with SCTV was like a sweet spot, too. Was a
Oh, absolutely. Because you were working with your oldest friends, and you're working in your hometown, and there was no real pressure. It wasn't the pressure of Saturday Night Live, where on Monday you have nothing, and on Saturday, the last hour and a half of the work week is the only hour and a half that counts. In SCTV, you would write for 5 weeks and shoot for 5 weeks, and you'd edit pieces. Sometimes we'd do a movie parody that we thought was brilliant, and then you saw it, and it didn't quite work, but it did work as a movie promo. And so you could save yourself in editing, but there was no pressure to, come on right now, and even though you have a cold, you got to do it. There wasn't that pressure.
And you had, John Candy you worked with, and Catherine O'Hara, Eugene
O'Hara,
again.
Andrea Martin.
Man.
Dave Thomas, Rick Moranis, Joe Flaherty.
And you mentioned Saturday Night Live. You were sort of reticent about that. You did that one season, you'd say you almost quit. It was hard.
It was, well, I was used to doing SCTV, which was ideal, and suddenly I was doing Saturday Night Live, which was like final exams every week.
So 1 year was good.
I had a 1-year contract.
Yeah.
And that was plenty.
Then after that came Three Amigos. And I love the story of you meeting Steve Martin for the first time.
Oh, yes, yeah. I went to his house to pick up a script. And I was stunned by, this was 1985, so he was already a massive star then. And had made many movies and had already done his stand-up career, and he was rich. And I went to his house and I saw there was a Picasso and a Hopper and I said to him, how did you get this rich? And because I've seen your work, I said,
And you didn't know how he would really react to that, did you?
He laughed at that. Well, I knew enough about him, that I knew he'd find that funny.
But now your relationship is adorable, that friendship.
Well, we became great friends. And I think, it's interesting about making movies because you're intensely in people's world for a couple of months, 3 months maybe. Maybe you're in Yugoslavia and you're making a movie and everyone knows each other and everyone knows who's having an affair and everything. And then the movie ends and you never see them again. But Steve and I kind of, we thought, no, let's not have this end. So we just continued. Well, we made 5 movies and TV shows and endless concerts.
And even do your colonoscopy prep together.
That's true. Tom Hanks and Walter Parks and Steve and I have colonoscopy parties. Well, it makes sense, Why make it a drudge?
But, you have to really know someone and feel comfortable with someone
Steve's been
to be able to leave the table every 5 minutes.
He's been a very, very close friend for 40 years, yeah.
Exactly. Okay, tell me how you created Ed Grimley.
Well, Ed Grimley was a character. When I joined Second City Stage in March of 1977, I was joining a show that already existed called The Wizard of Ossington, it was called. And I was replacing John Candy. And there was a scene called Sexist. And the premise was that Peter Aykroyd, brother of Danny, and Catherine O'Hara and John Candy were applying, but they were both applying for the same job. She was very qualified, and he was not a bright guy running a gas station. So now there was a guy I knew in high school who was like, wanted to be a photographer, and he take a lot of pictures, but he wouldn't develop them because he took them, and his voice always went up. And so I thought, oh, I like that voice. And then I used to grease my hair a little bit, and Peter Ackroyd, who's the interviewer, said, boy, your hair's standing taller every show. So I, to make him laugh, put it right up in a point. And then the audience laughed, and I thought, well, isn't that why I'm here? So it just kind of kept evolving.
And with this manic energy, but you're talking about just having, having to commit
evolved.
to it.
Yeah, I mean, initially in that scene, he was very low energy. But then I remember I did a piece on SCTV, The Fella Who Couldn't Wait for Christmas. And that was high energy because he was excited. It was Christmas Eve. So that begat kind of Ed's energy.
Mm-hmm. You must say.
Yeah, I must say.
It's perfect. And Jiminy Glick? I mean, really.
Jiminy Glick. Well, Jiminy Glick, I was doing a talk show for King World, 1999, 2000, and I wanted to, I remember we were near this CBS Center in LA, and there was a fish market, and I was 2 hours of makeup, and they put a putty nose on me, and I wanted to do it cinema verite, and people wouldn't know, like, candid camera, and I would hand them fish with my hands, and everyone said, oh, can I have your autograph, Mr. Short? And I thought, that's a drag.
Totally.
I guess I've been doing this too long. And but I'd made a movie called Pure Luck, and in 1990, and in that movie I was stung by a bee, and I swell up. And I remember even my wife joined the set and said, boy, I can't even see you in there. And I thought, oh, that's what I want. So we kind of did that makeup.
You had, when you were growing up, like you worshipped, you mentioned Frank Sinatra, Jerry Lewis.
Mm-hmm.
You end up meeting these people. What was that like to go? Hard to meet your heroes who were big when you were little. Because that space never gets
I just
smaller.
met Sinatra once.
But it made a great story.
Yeah. Well, I said to him, Mr. Sinatra, you have no idea, you have no concept of how big a fan I am of yours. And he said, I think I do. But Jerry I interviewed many times, and we did some sketches together, and he was on my talk show. So I got to know Jerry. We had some dinners. He was delightful. He was great with me.
How disciplined are you?
I think I'm pretty disciplined. I think you have to be disciplined, you know. Even if I'm doing a talk show or something, I send in 15 pages of thoughts, maybe jokes, and maybe things they could cover. And it's not because I think I'm going to get an agent if it goes well, but I know that if it doesn't go well, I'm not to blame. Maybe it's the host was off, maybe life was off, maybe I had a cold. But it's not, I can't look in the mirror afterwards and say, maybe if you tried harder.
Yeah, because you are working hard. That's just sort of your ethic. Like,
well, it's kind of what you have to do. I don't know how else you do it, you know.
In your book, you talk about something which was really interesting, you know, that sort of indicated, I think, how seriously you sort of look at life and what's important to you and your values. You talked about, you know, your 9 categories.
Right.
Can you tell me about that? I think it's really interesting.
Well, it was, I was now about 27. Maybe it was around that breakdown corner period or after. But for the first time, I had experienced a couple of months of not working, 4 months not working. And during that phase, you kind of go, all you think about is, oh, I'm not working. Oh, they've caught me. I've got to go back to school and all that stuff. And then by the end of the year that year, I realized I'd made more money than I'd ever made because after the 4 months, suddenly I had a big job. And I thought, well, I'd like those 4 months back. That was a waste of 4 months of my life. And then I thought, because I hadn't been out of school very long, that maybe it is just, you can't put too much emphasis on one idea, one category, which is career. That you have to treat your life like you take 9 courses at university, and it's the GPA that you want. The average is what you want to bring up. So for example, category 1 is self. What's your weight? What's your health? All that stuff. Category 2 is your wife and kids, or husband and kids. Category 3 is your original family, parents and siblings. Category 4 is friends. 5 is finances. 6 is career. 7 is creativity. 8 is discipline. And 9 is lifestyle. Are you having any fun? And so if you're not working, your career is in the toilet, then category 6 would get a D or an E. But you could get in the best shape you've ever been in, so category 1 is an A. It brings your GPA up, and you could maybe phone your parents and siblings more, and maybe be a better friend, and creativity, maybe try to write each day or whatever, that, and discipline. Again, work out more, be more, and then lifestyle, have fun. So these, if you do well in those categories, you can bring the bad career GPA up.
How did you figure that out, though?
I don't know. It's very Oprah of me, but I didn't. I don't remember.
But do you keep notes and actually...
I still do it. I still do it. I still give myself a Christmas grade and an Easter grade and a final.
And I'm assuming...
No, I'm doing great.
No, I bet you're doing great. You talk about you and Paul Schaefer were always looking at each other going like, how are we getting away with this?
I know. Well, we were just so happy to be out of school. I mean, we didn't get over that, you know.
But, you know, that was a long time ago.
50 years ago.
plus years ago that you're still pinching yourself and thinking, when are they going to catch on to me?
No, I don't think we're pinching ourselves so much. We're pinching ourselves now to see if the circulation's going.
Is there any work particularly that you're most proud of?
No, I'm proud of it all. Proud of it all. I mean, there are moments that you kind of are proud that you got through, like an opening night of a Broadway musical or something.
Or hosting Saturday Night Live.
Or hosting Saturday Night Live, sure. But I think, so those pressure things, which are more than, shooting a movie isn't a pressure thing, but those pressure nights, like Broadway openings and Saturday Night Live, you're proud of, but you know, you're proud of a lot of things.
Mm-hmm. Well,
you're proud of the effort. That's what you're proud of. You can't control the result or the personal taste. Comedy is the most subjective thing in the world. Some people love the Three Stooges, some people hate them. No one's wrong and no one's right.
Is there any way that you think you'll know when's the time to stop? I mean, you always had a funny bit, I think, about Lucille Ball. Like there was I Love Lucy, and then there's Here's Lucy, and then there's the Lucy Show.
Yeah. I think you know when it's time. Actors tend not to retire, you know. No one wants to see Judi Dench retire. But I think that if you reach a point where you're, you know, opera singers, by the time they were 58, would often retire because their voices weren't what they wanted them to be. And I think once you realize that you're a diminished version of what you once were, I think that's maybe time.
Yeah, I remember though interviewing Oscar Peterson, like post-stroke. He couldn't possibly do what he did, and then saying, you know, I still haven't written my best work yet. So
well, I mean, he doesn't have to perform it, right? So
that the feeling was that you always have to be looking for.
Well, I think artists, it's a personal journey. It doesn't, you know, there are certain things that you do, and if the audience doesn't like it, you don't care as much as you think people would expect you to care because you like it. It's like a painter doing a painting and saying, I love that painting, and other people saying, oh, I don't. And you say, well, fine. You don't have any taste, I do.
Yeah, it's not for you.
It's subjective, right.
The final question that we always ask is, what does being Canadian mean to you?
Oh, I think I feel like a member of a very unique club. You know, there's only 40 million of us. And, you know, for years, people would always ask me why so many people from comedy came from Canada and in comedy. And I think, oh, that's a silly question. There's no border to the arts, and then they just kept coming. You know, Mike Myers and Seth Rogen and so I think maybe there is something in Canada that we're kind of the middle sibling of three siblings, you know, the beautiful England, the sexy US, and we're this kind of, maybe our confidence isn't as much as the other two, but we have such soul and such wisdom, and we learn from everything around us.
Well, Canada's really proud of you, needless to say. And it's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Marty. We'll be back next week with another episode of Canada Files.
The preceding program was made possible through the generous support of Richard Pilosoff, as well as the following donors: Ted and Alice Kernahan, the Linwood Family Foundation, Jim and Sandy Treliving, the Browning Watt Foundation, Tony and Sherry Fell, Michael McCain and family, Richard Wernham and Julia West, Mary Davey, Clinch House Foundation, Bryce and Nikki Douglas, the 63 Foundation, David and Cheryl Carr, the Sheila and David Wilson Foundation, and by the Central Canadian Public Television Association.